Welcome back to CodingCatDev, where we give you cats the freshest dose of dev snacks. Welcome back, peeps, to CodingCatDev podcast. We got Anthony on the show today. What's up, Anthony?
What's up, man? Good to be back. It's been like
Yes,
2.5 years, I think.
it has been a while. Go back and check out that show. You know what? I'm gonna do a quick
You
search.
you probably don't want to. You caught me in my Web3 phase.
I know it. It's kind of funny because I think you got out of that fairly quickly, right?
Yeah, I worked for QuickNote, a Web3 company, for a little under a year, but my Web3 phase technically started in 2017. I actually wasn't just like a bandwagoner, and I'm still doing it now. I'm actually trying to get a crypto project to fund Autoshow. Dash
Nice.
is potentially going to fund it from their DAO. So
That's
if you look
amazing.
at my history, it looks like I like just hopped on the bandwagon, then immediately hopped off of it. That's not really what happened.
Yeah, I think we had you on a couple times, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's been too long, so it's exciting that you're kind of working on a new project today.
You have
Um,
a video. You have a new video intro. It's awesome. Little cat.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's kind of interesting when you go to YouTube these days. It's challenging to figure out like, do you put an actual intro in or anything else? And so it's always fun game of like, do you put that first? Do you put it in the middle? Where's it go? Does it go anywhere? And like, that's kind of cool because what we're going to talk about today kind of goes in line with all of that too. So
Totally.
I think, would you consider yourself kind of like a DevRel at heart? Is that like
Uh,
what?
the only dev job I've ever done professionally,
Yeah.
technically. My very first job I got was doing DevRel. It's kind of how I broke into the industry. So I did that at StepZen, where I was doing GraphQL, and then QuickNode, where I was doing Web3, and then Edgio, where I was doing like enterprise deployment security stuff. So yeah, I mean, now I'm kind of like a solo entrepreneur because I'm building out. I built an open source project that's going to be turned into an app that we're hoping to launch in April. But I still am a DevRel at heart, so I still create a lot of content. And the tool itself is it's not necessarily aimed at just DevRels, but it was built for me to accelerate my own content creation. So if you are a DevRel, it will probably be very useful for you. Jason Langsdorff wrote this blog post. It was like shaving the buffalo stick or something like that. There's one of these weird terms from his boss that has to do with like repurposing your content. So
Yeah,
that's kind of the thing.
I might have to look up this crazy blog post. I haven't read that one. Um, so let's break into a little bit. A good segue. So let's talk about auto show, and not to mix it up with your car auto show. Just FYI, folks, this is purely DevRel. So the tagline is automatic show notes for podcasts and videos. Auto show. Can you just break down like why people would use a tool like this and like how you're using it to repurpose content like that, and then we're gonna do a whole code walkthrough, folks. So it's gonna be a fun journey in AI for a little while too. So break that down for me.
Yeah, so I usually explain what I built it for because that gives you the best idea of kind of what it does. I had a podcast called FS Jam, and one of the things that I always wanted but never really had the time to do because it took me a long time just to edit the episode itself was go through and have just chapter titles. Like this is a really common thing with really big podcasts like your Lex Friedman's or whatnot. You go look at their YouTube video and you'll see timestamps for different chapters that are like 5 to 10 minutes each, and the chapter title will tell you something about what they're talking about in that section. So if you see like a 3-hour long podcast interview and you're like, I don't really want to listen to this whole thing, but I'm really curious what this person has to say about the New Jersey Jones or something really specific and random. And I realized that you could get AI to do this, around when ChatGPT came out. I got very into that and I was like, wow, this is amazing. You can do all this stuff. And I also was getting into OpenAI's Whisper tool, which was their last open source thing they ever released. Oh, they're talking about bringing open source back. We'll see about that. And they had this transcription tool so you could transcribe your video. And when you do that, it could be used for captions and stuff like that. So there was timestamps and then the transcriptions. And so what I did is I would feed that to ChatGPT, and write a prompt that would tell it kind of what I want. So I would ask it for a summary, and I would ask it for chapter titles and descriptions, and then it would just write out these show notes for you. And I was like, wow, this is really amazing and really useful. It saves me a ton of time. And then my brain started working, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a lot of manual effort, though, to have to do the transcription, write the prompt, put it into ChatGPT, get that back. So I started creating this automated pipeline where you would have a node script that would, or node CLI that would run a sequence of scripts, and it would do the transcription, it would append the prompt, and it would feed that to an LLM, and then it would get the response back. So that's kind of like the first MVP thing. And then from there, kind of expanded out. I added the ability for it to work with, so it started with just YouTube. So you just take a YouTube URL and give it to your CLI, and then it would do the whole thing. Then I started adding in things like if you wanted to work with podcast feeds, so like it had to parse RSS, XML stuff. And then I started adding in other LLM options, other transcription options. Then I started adding other prompts. So if you wanted to write a rap song based on your episode, you can now do that as well. Or if you want to write a blog post, or if you wanted longer chapter descriptions, or if you wanted just chapter titles, there's way more. It's like 13 or so prompts. So I kind of just adding to it, and it kept being able to do more and more things. And the last thing is going to be like, now it needs a front end. So currently working on a front end so that you don't need to know how to use like a CLI to do it. And that's going to be an actual paid product where people will sign up, they'll pay for credits, and then they'll use those credits to generate show notes and the length of the episodes, and then the quality of the LLMs you want to use will affect how many credits it costs. So,
and then you're gonna give it all to me for free just to be a tester, right? Like that's how this works.
The first couple of people will get a promo code to have a couple free runs. So yes, actually, that is true.
Very cool. So I think I poked around on the repo. Are you gonna leave it public for folks in the future as well?
The repo is gonna stay open source, forever. What we are going to do is the front end. The repo itself does have a front end. It's like very, very rudimentary. The front end we're building that will be the paid app. That is a separate repo. That is not going to be open source. So you won't be able to just like clone my whole company, but the logic behind it will stay open source. And if someone wants to like use the functionality without having to pay for the app, they just want to use their own, OpenAI API keys and stuff, that option will always be available. Because I'm a big open source person, I always have been, and I'm building this in open source for, it's almost been a year now. I think if you look at the first commit, I think it was in April of 2024.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's the most open source I've ever done, and it's got like over 500 commits on it and like 50 stars or something. So yeah, it's AJCWebDev/Autoshow.
Yep, and I got it in the show notes, and it'll be in the blog if you miss it anywhere. So sweet. So with that said, that's kind of the gist of it all. I want to see this thing work. Are you prepared to show off some code?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do a run first before we actually look at the code itself.
Okay.
So that people can see that. So let's do this. So when you're using the CLI, you have npm run AS, short for Autoshow, and then --, and then you can do file if it's a local file, or video if it's a YouTube video. And I've got this test file here for people.
I've always wondered, like, what's the extra -- for?
So that's because it's running a script. So it runs this, which is running txbase, which is this. So it's essentially when you have like an aliased script that you want to pass additional flags to.
You pass it through. Okay, got it. Cool.
Yeah. I learned that doing Autoshow.
I've been doing some CLI fun at work, and there's like a plugin called Chalk that you can use to like do questions and like colorize and stuff like that.
I use Chalk as well.
There you go. It's a very popular node-based one. So
Yeah, we'll see when we get the output here. We're going to get a bunch of chalk output. And then if you don't include a LLM, it will give you just the transcript and prompt, and you can give it to your own LLM. Like you can just feed it to a UI or a chatbot or something. But if you do want it to do the whole process in one go, then you can tell it what to do. You can do ChatGPT, Claude,
So
Gemini.
talk to me about
Yeah.
that for a minute. So is that because you have a LLM installed locally that it's able to do the first part, or?
Well, no, I'm saying so there's two things. So if you leave it out, it will just give you the prompt and the transcript. So it doesn't do an LLM run at all. So I'm
how is
saying
it actually pulling the transcript out?
so the transcript is through Whisper.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And that's probably why you were having trouble getting it working locally. If there's a couple of things that could have been challenging about getting this to run locally. There's a massive startup script that wipes out
I
your
was
databases.
messing Anthony before the show. I said,
it's
I
a
don't know,
dangerous
but
startup script. I
it
should
just
put
wiped
some
out my
warnings.
Postgres.
Yeah, that's a little intense. So in terms of the LLMs, well, let me just run this, and then more things will start to make sense.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So then what it does is there's 5 processing steps that it kind of runs through. So the first one is it generates the markdown. Since I'm doing a local file, there isn't a whole lot of markdown. When you do a YouTube video, all this stuff gets filled in automatically. Then it does a download audio step. So if you already have the file on your machine, it just converts it to WAV. Otherwise, it will actually download the YouTube video itself. Then it runs transcription. So it looks for a Whisper model. I didn't select any, so it just uses the base model. And then it selects the prompts. So there's 2 prompts that are the default, because we didn't select any prompts. So it gives you a summary and chapters automatically. And then it actually runs the language model. So you see here, since we selected ChatGPT, we didn't say what ChatGPT model we wanted. So it gave you one automatically. And the total cost was 0.05 cents. So these are cents, not dollars. It's fair because it's like a minute long video. And then those are all the process steps. So then if we go here.
So forgive my naiveness already.
Mm-hmm.
The Whisper part of this, that is not like calling out to an API at all, right? Like you have Whisper. Talk through how that part works.
Okay, yeah, sure. So first, just here's what it gave out. So Anthony and a guest reflect on the future of JavaScript and FSJam frameworks, discussing trends, challenges, and their experiences from the past year. So this is just a short clip from my podcast, FSJam. And then down here is the actual transcript.
That's incredible. Out of like a 1-minute video, it's able to. That's so cool.
Totally. So now let me break this down. So I walked you through the kind of 5 steps. So each of those 5 steps has its own specific file. So there's the generate markdown file, download audio, run transcription, select prompts, and then run LLM. So you were asking about run transcription. So let's go look at that file. So then there's the 5 process steps. So run transcription, it's going to figure out which transcription service you want. So there's 2 paid ones. You can use Deepgram or Assembly. So those give you higher quality transcriptions and also things like speaker labels and stuff like that. And then Whispers here. So the process LLM is the same. The run LLM also gives you a whole bunch of different LLM options. It's not in this file anymore, but basically it's built in a modular way to where you have the 5 steps, and then 2 of the steps, run transcription, run LLM, reach out to either one of these LLM files or one of these transcription files. So this is where the Whisper stuff happens. And literally, this is why I really liked building this just as like a Node CLI, first of all, because there's like JavaScript versions for a lot of the tools I'm using. There's a JavaScript, wrapper for FFmpeg and for Whisper. And I tried all of those and they weren't really that great. And what I ended up doing is I just have Node executing like process commands, basically, or exec commands, I think is the term. So it just throws in the Whisper command you would run in the CLI. So you see even here, it points to the Whisper CLI, and it selects the model, it gets fed the path of your file and then the path of the output file. And then I have it do this. This took me a really long time to get correctly. It does Whisper does this weird thing. This may be too much detail, but Whisper does this weird thing where sometimes it will start only doing one word per timestamp. And it starts off doing like 10 and then slowly gets to less and less and less. And then your transcript ends up being like 10,000 lines long. So what I did is I forced it to only do one word per timestamp. And then I wrote a regex to do 15 words per timestamp automatically. So if you look at the transcript now, it's very uniform in terms of they both kind of end fairly close to each other. And that seems to work out pretty well because then it makes sure that no matter what, it's not going to be longer than like 1,000 lines or something. And you don't get a whole bunch of extra timestamps polluting your prompt because then you're spending more on input tokens as well. So that's pretty much what's happening here.
And the only thing I can compare it to is we're in the same world, so we're trying to do the same thing essentially. And there's a couple products that are out there already, and so like with all of that said, I've been trying to throw it through Gemini and kind of do the same thing, right? But the interesting part on that side of things is you have to kind of start to specify, like, I want it in this JSON format. Here's a function that you can run, and here's what I want back. And the cool part or the interesting part when you start to break those down is, like I noticed on your regex, it kind of cuts off, right? Like part of that summary statement. So
yeah,
you have to be like very specific to say, I want a full sentence that has this summary only at every 1 minute to 20-minute length. Like you have to get so detailed. And I feel like that's what we kind of are calling prompt engineering now. That's where that starts to come into play.
Yeah, let's look at the prompts since you just mentioned it. So we have all of our prompts here. So the ones we were actually just using is the summary, and each prompt has a description of what the prompt is. So I tell it to write a 1-sentence description of the transcript and a 1-paragraph summary. So if we look back at what we had, you see there's this short description here, and I usually throw that into my meta description because it's about the right length, and then the longer summary. So I say write a 1-sentence description, 1-paragraph summary, and then I tell it specifically kind of how long it should be. So I say the 1-sentence description shouldn't exceed 180 characters, roughly 30 words, and the 1-paragraph summary should be approximately 6,000 to 1,200 characters, roughly 100 to 200 words.
Nice.
And there's it depending on which LLM you use, some of them will follow that more closely than others. And as the LLMs are getting better and better, like O1 really sticks to what you say, which is good, especially for the chapter descriptions. And then I give it an actual example. So the other one was long summary, write a 1-paragraph. Sorry, there's some long chapters. So create chapter titles and descriptions based on the topics discussed throughout. Include timestamps for when these chapters begin. Chapters should be roughly 3 to 6 minutes long. Write a 2-paragraph description for each chapter. Ensure chapters cover the entire content. Note the last timestamp. And then let descriptions flow naturally from the content. Avoid formulaic templates. Because what it was first doing is sometimes it would kind of like write each chapter in a certain way, which is like, that kind of LLM slop is the term they use to where like you could tell something's written by an LLM because even though it's like grammatically correct, there's just like something to it that makes it's really hard to put your finger on, but I'm sure you know what I mean.
Totally. Yeah. That's interesting. And like to your point, like you have to get this like so perfected for like what you're trying to accomplish and like exactly what you're asking for and things like that. I think that's the biggest challenge when you're starting to use some of these models. I am curious though, as you kind of dive into like this side of it, on like using Whisper and stuff like that, there's tools like Vercel SDK or AI SDK, and there's Firebase GenKit and things like that. I don't see that in this code base. Is there any like reason that you kind of just did it like more of a raw way of taking care of the different calls, and what was that like?
Yeah, I think I wanted to have as much control as possible because I was just building this for myself, and so I wanted to get as deep into the tools as I could, partly just for like learning, and also so I could really tweak them. And so we haven't looked at the ChatGPT file yet. So you're correct that I'm not using Vercel SDK, although I have used that. I used it just for like an agent project that I wrote a
Sure.
blog post about recently. But for these, I use the OpenAI's built-in JavaScript thing. So most of these I use either their library or some of them, like Firework here. I literally just do I just do a straight fetch call to
Ah,
their
okay.
API, which
Yep.
is kind of nice because then it's like you know exactly what you're getting and what you need to do, and then you can kind of standardize it. I'm starting to think more now. I want to start standardizing around the OpenAI thing because if you look at let's see, I don't think any of these I'm actually using it on, but I had a Grok implementation at one point. This used to be, I used to have like 10 LLMs, and then I picked like 4 of them, which I thought kind of suck, and then moved them to a doc that explains how to use them if you want. So if
Okay.
you go to the Grok one, this one is like you can use the OpenAI's library to use Grok, and you could do the same thing with like Mistral and
Yeah,
others. So
I found that interesting. I was reading through
yeah.
because Grok 3.0 just came out and everybody's
Mhm.
hyped about it, which it's frightening to me, honestly, what's coming out of it. But, anyways, with that aside, it basically says, hey, if you're using OpenAI, just swap out the model and you're good to go. And it's like, what? And like that took me a minute to like really understand. Like they're just utilizing all of the kind of SDK parts for
Mhm.
OpenAI just with their own model. So.
Yeah.
Um, it makes me wonder though when we start to get into like agents and things like that, where it's almost like workflowed out. If it makes sense to use something, more robust, maybe not. That's the wrong word, but like
More
something
featureful.
featureful. Thank you. Something like that, like Vercel's AI SDK or something along those
Mhm.
lines. Do you find that that's not necessary, or have you had enough experience to like make that determination yet?
It hasn't been necessary because for what I am doing, the LLM part is like one step in the larger workflow, and all it's been doing to make the workflow work is just a single completion. So
Okay.
I use that. So they all have like the completion API, and they all kind of work similarly. So it was just hit an API, send it text, and get text back, and that's been like very very simple and easy to do. Now I'm starting to work with embeds. So right now there's if you want to, you can take all of your show notes and pass them to OpenAI's embeddings endpoint and then query them. So it's like chat with your show notes kind of thing. Also a common feature a lot of these AI products are starting to do and have been doing. Like I
Talk
think
to me
right
a
around the
little
beginning
bit.
of like 2023, everyone did chat with your docs. You probably remember that.
Yes, but talk to me about embeddings because myself, I don't know that much and like how they work, and I think others are probably in the same boat.
Yeah, embeddings, the technical definition is crazy. It is kind of like taking text and turning it into math so that the LLMs can understand it. That's kind of like the most high level description I think you can give of it. But what it does is it lets you go beyond the model's knowledge base, essentially, because they're trained up to a certain point. Some of them can reach out to the internet, some of them can't. But if you want to ask it questions, like going back to chat with your docs, if you're working with like, a brand new library that was just written 2 months ago, the most LLMs aren't going to have any knowledge on that. So what you can do is you can take all of the docs and then turn them into embeddings, and then you could ask a question, and because the LLM can quote unquote read the embeddings, it can then search through them and give you an answer that has been tailored to that content specifically. So it's cool if you have show notes, if you have 100 podcast episodes, like this is something you could do. You have so many podcast episodes and videos and stuff. If you turned all of those into embeddings, you could ask a specific question about an episode you did back in 2022. Like you ask it about, my blockchain episode and be like, what did Anthony talk about on the blockchain coding cat episode? And it will find that episode and it will give you a response because you created the embeddings.
And where would you like place those embeddings? Would you create your own Postgres file or something like that to store that into?
Yeah, so if you look here, I have to change this. It says right now create embeddings and SQLite because I first was using SQLite. There is an embedding SQLite plugin that's like very, very new.
I actually love that because I'm doing all my stuff on Cloudflare. So for their vectorized database, it's going to be on that.
Yeah, maybe the part of the thing is because it's kind of new, it can be complicated. So I was using Node.js's built-in SQLite, but there's a limitation with it, or there's a limitation with the embeddings. It just didn't work, so I had to start using better SQLite 3 instead. So you're gonna hit stuff like that. Probably, I eventually moved off of SQLite, and now I'm using Prisma and Postgres, and I'm sure you have familiarity with Prisma. So it's using their vector extensions and creates embeddings here. So now it's all going into a Postgres database.
That's
but
really
it
cool.
can be done with SQLite. The first implementation did everything with SQLite.
I'm gonna have to try it because I have my D1 set up for Cloudflare. I'm curious if like the extension will still support this or if it's a different extension. But I love the fact in Prisma you can kind of do this style of setup for sure.
Yeah, if you check my Git history, or I'll find it and send you. I can send you what these files were back when they were SQLite, so you can see what I was doing.
Cool, thanks. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit, how you break it down in Whisper and like how you can kind of send it out and how to create embeddings and things like that. I'm curious from an overall like structure perspective, would you take it for me, there's two parts to kind of our content creation process. There's the upfront costs of like creating content where you need like images and like video outlines and things like that. But then there's kind of the post production side, which you're dealing with on this project. I'm curious if you would ever be able to take this to the next level of like creating videos out of it. So if you take like one of my 45-minute long podcasts like we're doing here, and I just wanted to break it up into shorts and create something, how would you kind of go through that process mentally, and could you do it with what you have now?
Yeah, so there's this guy right here. This one is fairly new. This is the create clips script. So what this does, which is super cool, is once you have show notes like this, so you see here you got these three guys like this. Technically these timestamps are not correct because the video is only 1 minute long, but that's usually if you're working with any sort of substantial length of content, these will be correct. So what the create clips script does is it finds these transcripts and then it clips it, and it just gives you it would give you 3 videos with these 3 titles.
And would you specify like a length of time for those videos?
So the length is based on the chapters.
That's why I'm wondering, like, if that first one is 3 minutes long, like I don't know that I would want to ever have a clip that matches chapters per se, because I might want like 5 clips amongst a chapter, right? So like if we're talking about like this whole thing could be a chapter on whatever video clipping, right? But I only want 90 seconds a piece so I can spin them out to YouTube. Is there a way to say, hey, take this chapter and break it down to clips accordingly?
The way you would do that is you would just have it create shorter chapters in the first place. So you just have it create 90-second chapters and then clip all of those. So the reason why it matches with the chapters is because that's what you see on the podcast, like Lex Friedman. There'll be a Lex Friedman channel, or Joe Rogan, and then there'll be Lex clips. And basically what he does is he just breaks up the episode into the different chapters, and each video is, however long. Some clips from shows will be up to like 15 minutes long, because that's more of like a YouTube clip. Like you're talking about like TikTok and shorts and
Well,
YouTube shorts.
shorts on like YouTube, like not 16:9, it's 9:16, right? Like shorts on
Mhm.
YouTube can only be up to 3 minutes now, I think is the limit.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, yeah, that scenario. I know a lot of people are looking to like break theirs up to release as full videos too, though, which makes sense to me if you do kind of a longer chaptering for sure.
Yeah, so for your use case, I would just try changing the prompt to get really, really short chapters.
Yeah.
And then you would have like, 20 clips from an episode or however many it ends up being. It's like a half-hour episode. It could be, 15 to 20 clips. And then that would kind of give you a similar thing. For me, I'm looking more for slightly longer things. Like for me, I think like 5 to 10 minutes is kind of a good range. The way the prompt is written right now, if you give it to O1, it will usually make all of the clips exactly 6 minutes, which is not always perfect, but it's a fairly good chunk of time because then it gives you a real meaty description of each of those chunks so you can kind of read through it and you get a good idea of everything that happens throughout the episode, and it kind of gives you a uniformity in that respect. Whereas when I first started doing this, when I was using like the older chat GBTs or Claude, if I gave it like a 2 to 3 hour long episode, it might give you chapters that were like a half hour long. Even if I was specifically saying these chapters should not be longer than 10 minutes, it would still do it because it just like couldn't give you that fine grained amount of control. But
Interesting.
O1 actually follows what you write to the T. So it gives you exactly 6 minute long chapters, which is kind of wild.
Is there any advantage, or have you tried going to like the newer models, like O4 or whatever's out? I'm so bad with the model names.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. O3 Mini is the only thing that's out right now. The new model is not here yet. They give you the crappy version of the new model and act like it's the cool new thing to use. O3 Mini is no better than O1. It's just faster. It's
Okay.
essentially equivalent. So as soon as O3 proper drops, yeah, I'll be using that day one.
I want to talk a little bit to like my most experiences on Google Gemini, not Vertex, which I just had a meeting with Google yesterday, and I'm like, your branding is just so rough around these things. But anyways, if you're looking into that, folks, Vertex is kind of the enterprise grade level of that. Gemini is more of the open API that you can hit. With that said, I'm curious. They have things that are called functions, and each function can run off and kind of do different things. So, like, I have a function that does a description. I have a function that does a summary. I have a function that does chapters. I'm curious if that's something that you've run across or are kind of maybe manually doing just the way you have your code split out.
So I'm not very into the whole Gemini world. I have a paid Gemini account actually, and every now and then when I want to compare across different models, I'll hit usually ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, and then look at all three of them. So what you're describing, I'm not even sure how that would map to the other
Okay,
models because there's um the term function is so overloaded. So there is
I
the
know.
concept of functions in OpenAI, but it's definitely not what you just described. So function calling is a whole different thing. Unless you're talking, does it give you like a JSON output?
It does when
Okay.
you can get JSON output without it, but with functions you can specify. I'm going to get the term wrong, but a model, essentially a framing of what should come back. So for chapters, I put in function and I'd say, I would like my chapters and I would like them with this specified time and I want hour, minute, second, and blah, blah, blah. Like I specify all of that in the prompt, but then I also say, here's what the JSON should look like. And that way I can get like time, description, and all of that stuff. And it's not in Markdown when it comes out. It's purely
Mhm.
in a JSON format that I
Okay.
specify.
So yeah, so this is the same as OpenAI's function calling. That I talked to Dev
Okay.
about this on one of our streams, Dev Agrawal, because that will be useful and something that I'll likely integrate at some point because it can give you a more fine-grained output. Because like you're saying, if you get it in JSON, you can do a lot more with it versus getting just a string of markdown text that's a bit unwieldy. The reason why I haven't done it yet is because just the way the thing is set up, the thing you want at the end is the markdown file, especially because it's already includes front matter, and you can just use it as like a web page if you wanted to. So
Yeah.
what I do is I run all of my YouTube videos and podcasts through this, and then just upload the output on my blog. So now I have like 200 blog pages of every
Yeah.
video and podcast I've ever done.
And
So
it's
that's
just
really
like an
nice.
MDX file for you essentially?
It's an MD file, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
you could have it do MDX also if you wanted. So yeah, the function calling is interesting. This also gets into where as you get to more and more extra features, something like Vercel's AI SDK, going back to what you said, makes more sense because it will hopefully homogenize across those different things. So I'm not sure if that also gives you the function ability for like OpenAI versus Gemini or not.
Yeah, I haven't
But
played with that, but I'd be curious for sure. I think GenKit does have that built in, but I think they're so focused on basically it's Firebase product, but it's an open library that you can call, and I think they're so specifically trying to make sure you can hit Gemini and everything else, that they're covering that use case as well.
yeah, I had a
Um,
buddy actually who built something called Ragged, which was meant to be kind of like a LangChain replacement. He doesn't really like, keep it up to date, so it's probably not something that you should like really use. But we did an episode about it a while ago, and he built something like super simple to where really you basically just have a single function that's just like you pass that function text and then it does your LLM call. And I don't know, have you used LangChain at all? It's
no, I really
really
haven't.
complicated. Yeah,
No.
it's super complicated. I don't really recommend it to people. But yeah, going back to your other question, like I really have wanted to be as close to the metal, so to say, with the actual different LLMs because you want to know kind of what they each offer, and you want to be able, as the developer, I think, to have a clear idea of where the value of different ones are. And having a library where it's just like you just change the model name, that is really nice, but it hides too many things
Sure.
from you, especially in a very fast moving, complex environment that AI is currently in.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West right now. It's fantastic. I'm old enough to have gone through the .NET boom and burst and all that fun stuff, and I have to
Yeah.
say, like, it feels like that again, which is exciting to me. Like it has kind of things revitalized in my opinion. So
Cool.
it's a fun time to be doing these things. I think a lot of people kind of see the negative side of it and people losing jobs and things like that, but I think there's a lot more opportunity as well. So it's just a mind shift and a gear shift for us.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of criticisms to have, especially when you get into like model bias
Yep.
and trying to research certain topics that it like, like open like ChatGPT like has opinions about things. Like
Yeah.
if you ask it about certain topics, it will have an opinion and it really shouldn't, So I do think there's a lot of things to still be worked out. I'm not as worried about the job loss stuff because I think that a developer with AI is going to be so productive that
Mhm.
they will be able to find a way to like make it in the industry. But I think if you're doing certain roles and you refuse to adopt AI, then you might get automated out of the job. Sure.
Yes. Yes, agreed. Or like you might have to pivot to a different role completely because your job is getting automated out. So
Yeah. Mhm.
definitely something interesting. I want to make sure before like we kind of completely shift off. Was there anything more specific that you wanted to show with Auto Show itself? Was there another
No,
like
I mean, really, the what you see is kind of what you get in the sense that like the workflow is pretty standard across if you're using different LLMs or different, transcriptions. Like we kind of talked about the different prompts that are available. So I think you have a pretty good idea of what the tool does at this point. And then like the embeddings, that's a fairly new feature. And then some of the things that I'm working on now are things like cron jobs and stuff. So if you have a show and you want, or if you're following a podcast, say, and you just want to always get the new episodes, you could like run a cron job that will just like check the thing every day, or have like a subscription that will like watch it. And every time something comes in, it just like runs it automatically. And then you can have like a constantly running thing of your shows that you're watching. Or if your own content, you want to have it just automatically generate stuff after you're done going live. Those are the types of things I'm working on right now. So more of those kind of like higher level workflow automation type stuff. And then the front end, obviously, so that people could use it who aren't devs.
Nice. Very cool. Any last minute thoughts about AI in general, or suggestions for folks getting started with stuff?
Oh, I mean, plenty.
Pretty broad, right?
I started using ChatGPT day one when it came out. I remember very clearly. It was November 30th, 2022, the day that changed my life.
Holy
Because
smokes. That's very specific.
I just remember I got into coding because I wanted to do AI like a long time ago. Back in 2016, there was a big AI hype cycle because of AlphaGo. There was this program that could play the Go game. And lots of people heard about this, even non-technical people. It's kind of like when, Gary Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue in chess back in the 90s. That was like an event. That was like the moon landing for some people. It was a really, really big deal. So the AlphaGo thing was kind of another big moment like that. And you also had something called Deep Dream, which was one of the first image models from Google that was creating these like weird psychedelic kind of images where you'd have like a field and like you see like little like animal faces kind of popping out of it and stuff like that. So I was just so fascinated by that. And at the same time, I was like a failed music major who was like living with my parents. And I was like wanting to just change careers. So I first got into coding to learn how to do like Python, machine learning, TensorFlow, all that kind of stuff. And it was so challenging. It was so hard to do that after years of failing at that, I was like watching all these, YouTube tutorials and stuff. And I'm like, for every one TensorFlow video, there's 10 Learn React videos. Maybe I should just learn this React thing. And then I did a boot camp and I got into web dev. And then I was like a web dev professional for years and years and years. And then ChatGPT happens and I'm like, okay, AI has actually arrived. Because that's what, that's what's different now versus from 2016. 2016, if you weren't a PhD mathematician, you had no chance of doing anything useful in AI. It just wasn't going to happen. Today, though, because the tools actually exist, that even non-coders can use ChatGPT for all sorts of things. My wife uses ChatGPT every single day now because I've gotten her into it. She was very reluctant at first. Actually, she really did not like it at first. But then I started showing it to her and I was like, you could do this with this. You could do that with this. And she started to be like, oh, okay, that's actually really useful. I could do this with this. I could do that with this. So the first thing I would say is just use the thing for basic everyday tasks or problems you have. No matter what it is, the common ones people talk about is, recipes or writing emails or summarizing emails. Is that funny joke? Is that now everyone is taking a bullet point, turning it into an email, and then everyone's taking that email and then turning it into a bullet point,
Yeah.
So that's the biggest piece of advice I would give people is just try and find something that is useful for you. And then as soon as you just find that one thing, that is the window to everything else.
Yep. It'll make you want to dig deeper and learn more and kind of grow from
Yeah.
there. So great advice.
And
Love that.
then I would say definitely try different models. So there's a lot of paid models now. Like if you want to use O1 Pro, you're paying $200 a month, which is pretty steep.
Yeah.
But I would recommend that take a look at least ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. Especially since you're saying you're really big into Gemini.
Gemini is completely free right now still. So like you could probably use that for quite some time. I think they're trying to just get everyone's heads wrapped around it. And so from every indicator I get, you're looking at a good year of free usage right now. So
interesting. Well, there is a subscription, so
there is
something you're getting for that.
It's actually apples to apples right now. So from everything I've been told, so it's kind of fascinating to me. When now, if you want Vertex and you want like highly scalable enterprise grade, 4 nines or whatever it's up to now, that's Vertex. On the Gemini side, the Pro plan, like there is paid pieces to it, and that's just basically giving you support. So it is free to use though. So with that, I will wrap. Oh yes.
One more thing.
Yes.
No, just one more thing.
Sorry.
For the devs out there, my last piece of advice is try out Ollama, because we didn't show this in the demo, but Ollama is a open source way to run models. Now, the big problem with this is that almost anyone on the machine they're using is not going to be able to run any really significantly powerful model. And this is kind of a huge issue. You'll be able to run smaller models, which can do some tasks kind of okay. But I think this is going to change. And I think within the next couple of years, the models that people will be able to run on consumer grade machines will get pretty good. So you want to start building up this knowledge base, because it's going to be a really, really big deal once we get there. So Ollama is a really cool open source library that makes it stupid simple to just run a single command, Ollama run DeepSeek R1, something like that. And then it basically gives you that chat interface right there in your terminal. You can start talking to it. You can get responses back. And then that is just running your machine. There's no API service. There's no one else is seeing your conversations, because you can have some pretty personal conversations with these chatbots. Some people are using it for therapy and all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
So you might want a local model for that reason. And then, then you can kind of like start to see what is happening behind the scenes with these models. So that would be my last piece of advice.
Awesome. Now you sparked one for me too. It's probably less on the developer side, but perplexity.ai, check that out as well. That actually scrapes a lot of websites into existence, essentially. And so that's a really cool like feedback loop. I use it every day. I have a pro membership on that one. So definitely dive into AI. I don't want you guys to get left behind, and check it out, and go check out Autoshow, automatic show notes for podcasts and videos.
Yeah, that's my wife. She wrote that tagline.
Love it. See ya.